Welcome to episode 47 of Fresh Thinking by Snowden Optiro. My name is Rayleen Hargreaves. I'm Principal Consultant and Reconcilor Product Owner at Snowden Optiro. And today I'm joined by Ian Glacken, who is an Executive Consultant with Snowden Optiro. Ian is a mine and resource geologist with many years of experience over a range of production environments and commodities. As well as presenting Snowden Optiro's one-day reconciliation training course, Ian has carried out lots of reconciliation reviews and studies and sees the best and perhaps the worst of reconciliation. But today we're going to discuss the issue of DOM, which is the declared or mined. Where does it fit into reconciliation? What does it actually mean? And what are the pros and cons of using the DOM as one of the cornerstones of mine reconciliation? So welcome, Ian.
Hi, Rayleen. Good to be with you again.
Thank you. So I guess just to get the audience in line with what we consider to be DOM, how would you define DOM and how does it fit into the mine value chain?
Well, I probably should talk about the mine value chain first. I think most people listening to this podcast or video will know what the mine value chain is, but the mine value chain is essentially the sequence of products from the mineral resource model through the ore reserve model, through the grade control model, through processing, through trucking, through mining, through blasting, through stockpiling, through milling, processing, and through product, which may come out the back of the plant or it may come off on some trains or boats or whatever. So that's the mine value chain. And part of that is this DOM, which stands for declared or mined. And the declared or mined is one of the important nodes in the chain, if you like. It's essentially the reconciled or recalculated processed plant figures that are compared with the mine figures. So that's what it is, the DOM. Yep.
Thank you. Can I ask, why do you think some companies or some mines choose to use DOM and other companies use something else? Let's call it, say, that recalculated or the factored mill figures.
Yeah, it's to do with the stockpiles. And as you know, anyone that works in a mine, there's lots of stockpiles. Some mines have no stockpiles, but most mines have a few. Typically, there's a stockpile after the crusher at the plant, and we call that the COS or the coarser stockpile or the cone, and that's part of the mill process. Then we have the crusher going backwards through the mine value chain. Then we have the ROM, the run of mine pad. And most mines have a very decent size run of mine pad. Some of them have tens of millions of tons on the run of mine pad. So the idea of the DOM is that the stockpile adjustment, which is something you need to do every month or every period, needs to be built into the figures. Now, they can either be built into the mine figures or they can be built into the mill figures. And the DOM is a name whereby the stockpiles, maybe just the coarse ore stockpile or the cone, or even the ROM stockpiles, are built into the mill figures. So that's really the meaning of this DOM, this phrase, declared or mined.
So what are the issues with stockpiles and DOM? Does it depend where the stockpiles are? Whether they're in the processing plant or whether on the ROM pad, or even at the mine themselves. So how do we decide which stockpiles should be actually included in that DOM calculation?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think if you have a stockpile after the primary crush, in other words, in the process plant, that's the cone or the COS, I think you've got no choice but to include that into your reconciled or recalculated mine figures. However, if you have the ROM pad, which as we've said, most companies do, then the question comes, are you going to incorporate the change in these stockpiles into the mill figures, or are you going to incorporate those into the mine figures? So those companies that use the DOM, sometimes they just include the cone, but there are a number of companies that use and incorporate the ROM, in other words, the change in the ROM stockpiles into the mill figures. So if we think about the three pillars of reconciliation, these are the Parker factors or the F factors. What Parker calls the mill feed, this is sometimes the ROM. I think when Parker originally did this work, his idea was that the mill feed would be the material that's fed into the processing plant. But when people use the DOM, what they're doing is they're incorporating sometimes the change in the mine stockpiles into that ROM calculation. What I found is that this was something that was originated perhaps by Barrick. Barrick is a big company, as you know, and you tend to see the use of the word DOM or the incorporation of DOM at mines that were formerly run by Barrick or are run by former Barrick employees. I would note that Barrick mines now, most of those in Africa, don't use this DOM and haven't for years, but there are companies and mines that do use the DOM.
In your opinion, Ian, are there better options than using DOM? So like including those stockpile adjustments in the mill reconciled figures, or anything else you can think of that would be a better indication. And what does it, I guess the question I'm wanting to know really is, what is the boundary between the mine and the plant when it comes to these sort of figures?
Yeah, well, if you use the DOM, in other words, if you incorporate the ROM stockpile adjustments into the mill figures, then essentially the boundary between the mine and the mill is the road up to the ROM stockpile, which to me is not right. And the main issue with that is that it's the relative uncertainty in the stockpiles. I sort of take the view that the uncertainty in the numbers, such as it is, and it can be quite significant, should all be gathered on the mine side rather than on the mill side. It's a truism that apart from the coarse ore stockpile or the cone, which is generally pretty well known, most of the uncertainty is on the mine side. So my objection, and let's put the cards on the table, I don't like the use of DOM. I prefer not to use it. But my objection to that is that the people that use the stockpile adjustment on the ROM as part of this declared ore mine figure are actually incorporating a considerable amount of uncertainty into something which should be fairly well known. That is the recalculated mill figures. So let me ask you a question. However the mine handles these reconciliation figures, whether they're the stockpile adjustments, whether they're built into the mine figures or whether they're built into the mill, how can that be handled in Reconcilor, which is obviously the product that you're in charge of?
It's only sort of recently that we've actually been requested to build in the DOM into the mine value chain, which is sounds a little strange, but it's about keeping that transparency on how you are calculating your numbers. So I think within Reconcilor itself, we can place that DOM anywhere. We can place it around the ROM stockpiles. We can also place it around that coarse ore stockpile. But as long as it's transparent as to where it's sitting, and so that anybody can actually calculate. What we do need to do to be able to calculate that DOM, though, is to have that stockpile delta. And so that's where the issues come in. It's like, are we doing the stockpile delta on the ROM stocks, or are we doing it on the coarse ore stockpile? And we absolutely want those stockpile adjustments, okay? So there's no doubt about that. But yeah, the impact that they may have on the actual metal and the grade that you're then sending to the plant can obviously have a significant impact. So within Reconcilor itself, it can handle it any position. Probably got more clients with it around that coarse ore stockpile than we have around the ROM. But sure. Yeah.
I should say that there is an alternative term for the DOM. That's the RAM, which stands for Reconciler's Mind, and you do see that in quite a few mine value chains. So if you have something called the RAM, the Reconciler's Mind, or if you have something called the DOM, it's all the same. So if you had to make a call on this, whether you would incorporate, if you were designing a reconciliation system, would you incorporate the stockpile delta into the mine side of things, or into the mill side of things?
Oh, I'm going to put some people off and turn some people on. Look, I don't know that I can actually make a call on that myself because I've seen the benefits of both, and I've seen the reasons as to why certain companies are doing it a particular way. I guess especially when you don't have a lot of confidence in your mining or your mining movements, so the material that's going to those stockpiles, and maybe there's a sampler or a weightometer on that crusher, then it probably does make sense to have it on the coarse ore stockpile. But I think there's benefits to having either. But I have to say, back in the day when I was a mine geologist, we didn't use DOM. Okay, we just did the straight standard metrics.
Yeah, look, I think if I was designing a reconciliation system, which I do occasionally for people, I definitely would incorporate the stockpile delta on the ROM as part of the mine figures. And then stockpiles, if there are any stockpiles at the plant, the COS, I'd incorporate that into the mill figures because of what I said earlier on, is that you want to try and bracket the uncertainty in the mine in one part of the system,
Yeah.
and then the relative lack of uncertainty in the plant, you want to have that in another system. But like you, I do recognize that some people, for whatever reason, want to use this DOM or RAM or whatever you call it.
That sort of wraps up our chat of this very interesting and sometimes frustrating topic. Thanks, Ian, for giving us your view. I possibly didn't give much of my view, but
No, that's fine.
thanks for your view.
I think people are, whatever you say, people are going to disagree with you. But I think the important thing is whatever you are going to do, it's clear. It's clear to your managers. It's clear to yourselves. It's clear to your stakeholders what you're actually doing. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Although, as I mentioned to you, I do have a particular view on this use of DOM or RAM.
If you'd like to listen to more of our Fresh Thinking by Snowden Optiro podcasts, you will find them for free on our website, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and most other podcast platforms.